it's really important that we set goals, because if we don't set goals, then where do we know where we're going to? We can just be clearing things or just aligning to different things, but we're not actually saying, right, we're here now. So it is really important to set goals. But today's going to be a little bit different in the way that how I work with goals. And this was something that I uncovered really when I was ill. So I'm going to be a bit vulnerable. I know some of you have heard my story before, but I'm going to talk about my story when I was ill, and why I was so desperate to change, and why change just wasn't happening with me, why my goals weren't working. And then I'll tell you how I set goals and how I now work with goals, but they're more inspired goals, listening to my system. Okay. So in 2020, during COVID, I know a lot of you know this. Um, I did become very ill. So I just remember I was sitting next to my husband when I got a phone call, and it was from my cardiac professor, and he told me that I was in severe heart failure. He said over the phone, because we couldn't go into the hospital, and I couldn't see anybody. He told me I was likely to have a pacemaker, and that I'd probably need full-time nursing care, nurses coming into the home and looking after me. Um, I couldn't go into hospital to get any sort of reassurance. I couldn't even see my own children. I had to tell them over the telephone. And I remember afterwards just keep repeating to my husband, our dream was to go and live on the Isle of Wight when we retired. And I just remember turning to him and just saying, I'm really sorry, but I'm not going to be able to live with you on the Isle of Wight. It was really quite sad. Um, and it really wasn't about not getting to the island. It was just the thought that, the future that I thought I was going to have, it was just sort of vanished. It was disappearing in front of my eyes. Now, this diagnosis of heart failure came after a previous diagnosis of neuroendocrine cancer, so hormone cancer. Um, and so can you imagine, I'd already sort of got over that, and then I got told that I had this heart failure. My nervous system just went into complete shock. I just thought, this is my time, and it's obviously time for me to go. If one thing's not going to get me, another thing will, sort of thing. Um, and I just felt completely in shock. My nervous system went into complete shock. And here's what shock does. It doesn't ask, what do I want? It asks, how do I survive? And fear began designing my future for me. So I went into decline, I went into dependency, I went into that victim mindset, needed to be looked after, just couldn't believe it, didn't know how to move forward. There was nobody that I could talk to give me sort of any positive incentives to move forward. And I think this is what happens to most people. They don't consciously decide to decline in their life, but that survival wiring just decides it for them. And so we're told, aren't we? If we look at, let's just look at goals. We're told to set goals, to move forward, to write them down, to visualize them, to make a vision board. And many people are hugely successful doing this. But if your nervous system is in survival mode, your goals will be survival based. They will be fear driven. Um, so when I decided that I was going to change, I meant it. I was disciplined, I was focused, I was determined. And day one, I started strong. So I was like, no alcohol, no takeaways, make sure I get exercise, drink, 8 glasses of water a day, take my vitamins, no scrolling on my phone, all the usual stuff when you want to do a big transformation. Day one was really strong. I did really well. I was really, in the zone. I thought, this is great. I'm gonna, be healthy, and I was really positive. Day two, I was still strong, but by day three, something inside really shifted. And it wasn't, sorry, somebody's in the waiting room. Okay. So yeah, so by day three, something has shifted. It wasn't because I was being lazy. It wasn't because there wasn't any motivation, because of course there was motivation. My life was on the line. It was my nervous system, and I could feel it. I could feel this intense internal pull. I had, we talked about this last week, didn't we, with dopamine. I've had those urges. I had cravings, and these just weren't subtle. They were really, really strong. My body wanted that instant relief. I was craving alcohol. I was craving takeaways, craving distraction, craving my phone, craving work. And all of these things that had contributed to my illness in the first place. I was actually craving for them. It just didn't make any sense. And I remember sitting there thinking, how can I want, how can I want to live and also want this as well? Because I did want to live, as I said, my life was on the line, but my nervous system was wired for instant comfort. And this is, why we talk about dopamine again. Remember, dopamine is not that pleasure chemical, it's that motivation chemical. It drives that seeking behavior. So when your system is stressed, dopamine looks for relief, fast relief. So my system was looking for sugar, it was looking for alcohol, it was looking for scrolling on my phone, it was looking for busyness, just keeping busy and seeing clients, anything that just got me out of feeling the pain and the discomfort that I was feeling. So there I was, stuck between two forces. The version of me who wanted long-term healing, and then the dopamine-driven part of me that wanted short-term comfort. And that is the war that most people are fighting. It's not a motivation problem, it's a regulation problem. Because when your nervous system is dysregulated, your brain will always prioritize immediate reward over long-term vision and goal setting. I'll just repeat that, I think it's really important. So when your nervous system is dysregulated, your brain will always prioritize immediate reward now, because it only knows now, this present moment, over any long-term vision and goal setting. It's always, and that's biology. And I could feel that. I could feel my chest was tight, my thoughts were racing, my body was restless. And if I had relied on willpower alone, then dopamine would have won, because willpower is a limited resource. So then that was the moment I realized, I cannot fight my nervous system. I had to regulate that first. So you cannot create when your body is in threat, when it's in survival mode, which is why I've created the life cycle the way that we have, the life reset cycle. It's why it's so important that we do phase one work. And I think people get fed up of me saying, go to phase one, go to phase one. But we cannot create, we cannot achieve our goals, we cannot move forward if we're dysregulated, because we're in survival mode. So before I set a single goal, before I decided anything about my future, I knew that I had to heal that internal noise. I had to get myself out of survival mode. I had to regulate my nervous system. I had to move my body out of survival mode. And then I had to neutralize all of that emotional charge, the fear, the catastrophic images, the trauma response, because until all of that quietened, I couldn't hear anything else. So this is the part that people don't talk about. When the nervous system settles, when the emotional charge clears, when the mind stops racing, you begin to hear something quite subtle, whispers, not loud ambition, shouting at you, but just gentle internal whispers, a sense of direction that doesn't feel forced. And this is what I discovered. So for years, I'd lived on automatic pilot. I was achieving, I was doing, I was moving, and I hadn't been listening to my body. And then when I regulated my system deeply enough and cleared the survival responses, I entered a coherent state. Now, we obviously hear a lot of people talking about a coherent state. So I'm just going to touch on what that means. So coherence is what happens when your brain, your body, and your identity are no longer arguing with each other. When you're in survival mode, your system is fragmented. Your thoughts are racing. Your heart is pounding. Your chest is tight and your attention is narrow. Your limbic system, your threat detector, is running the show. And when that happens, you don't create, you just defend. You don't design the future, you just brace for it. And coherence is the opposite of that. So neurologically, it's when your nervous system settles enough for your executive brain, the part responsible for reasoning, perspective and decision making, to come back online. Your breathing will slow, your heart rhythm steadies, your stress chemistry reduces, and your perception widens. You feel calm, grounded and present. And when all of that noise quietens, you then become what I call the CEO of your system, the Chief Executive Officer of your system. Many of you will have heard me talk about the different parts to our personality. And inside of us, we have many parts to our personality. We have parts that are very fearful. parts that are protective, parts that are ambitious, parts that are wounded. And when we're dysregulated, all of these parts become very loud and they all start competing with each other. But when you're coherent, you become the leader. You can sit in your self energy. You can be calm, grounded, and curious, which is what I ask you to do when we do the neutralizing negatives. And when you're in that place where your eyes are closed and you're just sitting with your body and your nervous system is completely calm and regulated, you can start asking your system things like, what is it that you need? What is hurting? What needs healing? What direction feels true, feels right? And as you heal the nervous system out of survival, as you neutralize stored emotional charge, as you process the memories and sensations held in the body, something extraordinary happens. Paths begin to surface, opportunities begin to appear, ideas feel clearer. You connect with your inner wisdom, not because you forced it, but because you've made space for it. And this is really disciplined inner work. And this is where real goals, I believe, come from. So I believe that transformation requires two layers. So we think about the hardware when we do the BWRT, we're working with our neural pathways, our autonomic regulation, our stress response, that part of us that runs like a machine. But then we've got the software, which is like our identity, it's our energy, it's our inner guidance, our inner wisdom. So when you heal the hardware, you exit survival. And then you just need to upgrade the software, and that will help you define direction. So when both of those things align, you can then start moving forward powerfully. And this is why the work must be done in this order, which is why I've done the life reset cycle in that order. Regulate first, then clear the charge, heal the nervous system, and then you can listen and move forward. Because once you are coherent, you are the leader of your system and you are in flow. Your goals, they're not forced. Your system will tell you what it needs. Now, some people call this downloads. I've called this downloads for years. You know, those early, don't know if any of you do this, but in the early hours of the morning, you're just between sleep and awake, and all this wonderful information just comes in, and it's giving you direction and giving you guidance. And this is then when you can take inspired action. So just going back to my story, I was told that my life would likely shrink, but instead it's expanded. I learnt to set goals from coherence, and once I took that direction, I was able to move forward. I was able to move forward and I changed my lifestyle, change my identity, change everything step by step. It wasn't frantic, it wasn't desperate, but it was directed. I was working deeply with my body. And so, as you know, today I live on the Isle of Wight, I work online. You know, my heart is strong. The professor said, you know, I don't know what you've done, but keep doing it. You know, your heart has been reversed, you know, and not because I denied reality, because I wouldn't face up to it and I was like, no, I'm not going to do that, but because I decided which direction that I was going to go on. So most people are trying to set goals while their nervous system is still in survival mode. And then they wonder why they can't sustain change. But when you regulate and when you clear the noise, when you heal deeply, you will hear it, that steady internal whisper. That path does not feel forced, it unfolds. And from that place you can regulate, you decide and you direct, and your life reorganizes accordingly. Change is not about pushing harder. It's about quietening enough to hear who you are becoming and then having the courage to walk toward it. So what I'm going to do is just go through step by step just the process of doing that. And this is something that I've been doing since 2020. And I'm sure many of you do this as well, or part of it as well. So the most powerful time to access clarity is the moment between when you're deeply asleep and full awakening. So just as you're waking up, just before the phone, before the emails, before the mental to-do list, and before all of those habitual thoughts all start racing in. because when you wake up, your brain is transitioning from a slower theta wave, delta waves, into beta. And that window is highly receptive, it's highly integrative, highly suggestible. So most people waste it by grabbing their phone as soon as they wake up. Oh, I wonder if any emails come in or WhatsApp messages. So instead of doing that, when you wake up, don't move immediately. Just lie there. I call it floating. You just lie there and notice yourself coming up through these different brain states, and just stay there and just float there and just notice. And there'll be a moment before all that the familiar thoughts come in, and that's your doorway. So before the same old thoughts start, remember about 80% of our daily thoughts are just the same old thoughts from yesterday. They're just repetitive. So you don't want to get into all of that. Just stay there and just breathe, and slowly just start being aware of that heavy feeling that's in your body. Let the nervous system remain in that softened state. And if you feel that you're coming up too quickly, just bring yourself back down, just ground yourself. Notice the bed, notice your breath, notice your chest rising. Remember, the goal is not to think. It's hard when you try not to think, but the goal is just to stay in that sweet spot. The goal is to stay coherent and just float there, and then check in with your system and ask yourself internally, what does my system need today? Remember, I call it the CEO. You're the CEO of your system, so you need to be the leader. So you're checking in with your system. What do you need today? So you're not saying, what have I got to do today? It's like, not what's on my to-do list, but what requires attention in my system. And then just wait. Don't force an answer, just float, just hover, and just notice what arises. So I'm going to explain this morning for me. So for me this morning, when I did this, I'm just waking in that sweet spot, and I'm just checking in with my system. Is everything okay? It's not an obsessive thing. It's just like, are we all okay? Is everything okay? What I'm actually doing is checking in with all of my parts, checking in with my system. Nothing too dramatic. And what I noticed, there was this very dull ache in my tooth. Could have been anything really, but just a dull ache in my tooth, and that's where my attention got. So then I reassured my system, yes, I'll book the dentist. Thank you for letting me know. And I'm working with my system, talking to my system. Then I carry on listening and just floating. And then it's really interesting, I hear this other thoughts coming in. And it's like, I don't want to go. It's too expensive. I don't have time. I'll do it later. Really interesting stuff that's coming up. And this is pure gold. It's information from my system to me, because resistance reveals stored memories. So I sit with it. I felt it in my chest. I felt that fear of the dentist, an old experience from an earlier imprint. And that is the part that has been delaying that action, delaying me going to the dentist. So instead of me overriding it all, like just saying, I'll go to the dentist, I'll do that sometime, and ignoring it. No, I'm tuning in and really listening to my system. I become the CEO. I become the leader. And I say to myself internally, okay, and I can feel where that is in my body, because I'm so attuned to it now. So I've been doing this work for so long. I'm so attuned to where I feel that thought. I will say, I hear you. I know that you're scared. I know this reminds you of something old, but it's okay. And I'll make sure everything is okay. We will be okay. You will be okay. And what I'm in self energy. And I'm just talking to myself in that calm, compassionate, but authoritative way. Now, this might be a child part of my personality. So if I turn round and just said, oh, stop being a baby, or if I said, oh, I'll go one day, but I'm ignoring that part of me that's trying to talk to me in the early hours of the morning, then it's not being very caring or very calming, and my system feels like it's not being heard. So I'm not bullying my system. I'm listening, I'm being open, and I'm allowing my body to talk to me, allowing expression. And so when parts of us feel heard, they'll soften, and that's regulation. So here's the inspired goal then. Now my goal is no longer, I've got to book the dentist. My goal is, I'm looking after my system. I have a responsibility to my system. I am leading my system towards health. So booking the dentist becomes aligned, inspired action. It's not just something on the list that I've got to go and do. It's because I'm accountable and I want to look after my health. And that's the difference between reactive goals and inspired goals. So reactive goals are driven by pressure. I've got to go and do this. I've got to go and do that. But inspired goals are driven by coherence, where we're listening and then we're taking action. So before the day floods in when you wake up in the morning, just take one step. Just listen. Just spend some time just to listen and just notice I am the lead. And what is it that the system needs? And that will build trust within your system. And that will give you a sense of responsibility and a sense of ownership so that you can really look after yourself and really do that healing where it's needed. So how did that land with everybody? Let me just stop. Oh, can you say that again about resistance, please? Yeah. I'm just going to stop recording now.